You know, maybe this is a stupid time to make a video like this. The smart move would be to wait until Season 2 was almost out, or at least had a release date. But, well, my Apple TV free trial was about to expire, so...
You'll never get a cent out of me! Never!
Anyway, let's talk Severance. If you missed the boat on this show, and I wouldn't blame you if you did, it's on Apple TV. It's a prestige thriller/comedy satire show about office workers who have their memories split between work and home. While they're at work, they have no memory of their lives outside of work, and vice versa. It's such a cool premise that lends itself to a lot of mind-bending storylines. And, like every other show I talk about here, it's packed full to the brim with mystery. At the end of the first season, there's so much we don't know, and so much that's still unexplained. So before Season 2 comes out, let's recap the first season to refresh our memories on everything that happened, and talk about all the little details you might have missed, so we can look at how the mystery has unfolded so far and make some guesses at what might get revealed in Season 2. Let's see if we can figure out what Lumon Industries is up to. This video will be a little bit of everything. Part summary, part literary analysis, part predictions, part mystery box review. I'm trying to make more videos about shows that are currently running instead of waiting to make one giant video once it's over. It's fun to take stock of how a show is doing once I'm done watching one season, so I can get a feel for where it's headed. Let's start with a general recap. The first episode opens on a woman named Helly. She wakes up inside an office complex and finds that she has no memories before this point. Our main character, Mark, explains to her that she's a severed worker for Lumon Industries. In the outside world, Helly was hired by Lumon and got the procedure called Severance, meaning that there are basically two Hellys, one in the outside world and one inside Lumon. This Helly, the innie, only has memories of when she's inside Lumon, and the outie Helly only has memories of outside of work. Every time she enters or leaves the office, she switches over. In practice, that means that this Helly is trapped in a job that she didn't sign up for and doesn't get paid for and physically can't leave. If she quit or got fired, it would basically be like dying. This is true of all her coworkers as well. If that sounds like actual hell, yeah, it basically is. But Mark encourages her to look on the bright side and find a way to enjoy her life here. Mark is in charge of their 4-person department called Macrodata Refinement, and they work with 2 other employees, Irving and Dylan. Helly gets a lot of focus early on, but Mark is the real protagonist. Like Mark's brain, the show is split into 2 halves. Inside Lumon, Helly helps Mark and the others figure out that their situation is massively screwed up, and they organize a rebellion. Meanwhile, in the outside world, the outie version of Mark figures out that something's wrong at work, and puts together clues to figure out what's happening. Lumon is really strict about making sure that innies and outies have no contact with each other whatsoever, so each version of Mark learns different information and has to figure out what's going on using their limited set of facts. Very quickly, it's obvious to us watching that there's something fishy going on. The stated reason why Lumon employees have to get severance is so that the work they do stays a secret, so they can't tell the outside world. But the work they do makes no sense. All they're doing is sorting numbers based on how they feel about them. Why does this need to stay a secret if even the employees don't understand what they're doing? And besides that, the bosses, Mrs. Cobel, Mr. Milchick, and Security Chief Grainer, work really hard to keep the severed employees isolated, control their thoughts, and generally treat them like children. Even without all the shady stuff we see happen during the season, we know there's something wrong here. That's the general premise. Now I'll go over all the most important plot points of Season 1 to see how they might all fit together. Helly gets hired to replace the previous employee, Petey, after he suddenly disappeared. In the outside world, Petey gets in contact with outie Mark, even though this Mark doesn't actually know him, and he explains that he ran away from Lumon after he figured out that something was wrong there. He also got reintegrated, meaning that he has all his memories from both versions of himself. He has plans to explain more, but the reintegration process gave him brain damage, and he dies before he can tell Mark anything else. That's a classic. I have all the answers, I'll explain everything in a little while, just hold on a second, bleh, I'm dead. This is what gets Mark down the rabbit hole of figuring out what's going on at his job. Petey had gotten in contact with a sort of rebel group who helped him and reintegrated him. Mark tracks them down and has the briefest of meetings with this one woman who apparently used to perform severance procedures for Lumon and who now does reintegration. This whole group seems pretty important, but they've barely been in the show so far. Mrs. Cobel rules the severed employees with an iron fist, but she herself answers to the board, the head of the company. For whatever reason, Mrs. Cobel is leading a double life as outie Mark's neighbor, Mrs. Selvig, to spy on Mark. She also gets weirdly close to Mark's sister Devin as she gives birth to her baby. She has some kind of personal mission that goes beyond her duty to the company itself, which pushes her to do some extreme things, like go extract Petey's severance chip from his corpse. Lumon was founded by a man named Kier Eagan many years ago. His descendants have run the company ever since, and the current CEO is named James Eagan. Kier is worshipped by the employees like a god.
The work is mysterious and important, and we deal with the uncertainty it brings us in the way that Kier would have wanted.
At Lumon, Irving meets and starts a flirtationship with another employee named Bert from another department called Optics and Design. Weirdly, each department has heard stories about how the other department is full of violent maniacs, but they're all normal people. This looks like a scheme by the bosses to keep the employees divided. Both Irving and Bert bond over their shared love and devotion to the company, but when Irving notices how much the company tries to keep them apart, culminating with Bert's retirement, he finally decides to join the others in their rebellion.
Let's burn this place to the ground.
The reason why Mark wanted a severance job is because his wife, Gemma, died in a car crash, so he wanted to turn his brain off for half the day instead of dealing with his grief. But eventually we see a photo of Gemma, and we've seen her before. She's Miss Casey, the wellness counselor in Lumon. Mark's sister Devin gives birth to her daughter, during which she runs into the wife of a state senator who's also giving birth. After talking to her before and after the birth, though, Devin figures out that she had severance, so she wouldn't remember the pain of childbirth. And her husband is a major advocate for expanding access to severance in the general public. The innies find out about a protocol that lets them wake up outside the office, so they hatch a plan to go into the outside world and find a way to escape for good. Mark wakes up and gets into contact with Devin about everything that's happened to him. Irving goes to find Bert, and Helly finds out that she's part of the Eagan family. She's at a gala about to give a speech about how great severance is, but instead she tells everyone about how horrible it is to be a severed worker. Mrs. Cobel tries to stop her and says that this will only make things worse for her and her friends, but Helly ignores her, of course. The season finale ends right as Mr. Milchick cuts off their escape, and Mark figures out that his wife is still alive.
She's alive!
That's just about every major event that happens in Season 1. But there's one more thing I have to recap. In addition to the show, Apple also released a little tie-in book called the Lexington Letter. If you have an iPhone, you can download the ebook for free right now through your iBooks app. It's really short, so feel free to pause this video, go download the book, and read it right now. But in case you don't feel like doing that, I'll tell you what's in it here. The Lexington Letter consists mostly of a long letter to a journalist written by a former Lumon employee named Peg. She worked in Macrodata Refinement as well. So in the show, we're told that innies and outies can't pass written messages to each other because the exit to the building has advanced code detectors that find them. But Peg and her innie find a way to communicate by writing in a pictographic language called Puglish that she made up when she was a kid. They become pen pals essentially. Things are fun for a while, but Peg ends up discovering that minutes after her innie finished a file called Lexington, a bomb blew up a truck owned by a Lumon competitor. No one knows what the workers actually do down there, so maybe this is somehow what they're working on. Bombs. The journalist forwards it to her boss, who tells her it's probably all made up. But her boss is named Jim Milchick, whom we can assume is related to Seth Milchick. So something's getting covered up here, especially since Peg dies mysteriously a few days after sending the letter. The end of the book also includes the orientation manual for Macrodata Refinement employees that we see in the show. It doesn't tell us anything we didn't already know, though. Okay, now let's sort through the dangling threads that we'll want resolution for in Season 2 and beyond. Is there enough information to guess where the story is going? Well, no, but it's fun to try. One of the bigger questions I had while watching was, what was the deal with Mrs. Cobel? All throughout Season 1, she's sneaking around doing unexplained shady stuff with no clear motive behind it. For starters, why did she live next to Mark under a fake name? Was it to keep tabs on him, to see if he started figuring out too much? But she was there way before Mark started getting suspicious. And who or what is she loyal to? At first, she seems fully part of Lumon, even fully believing in Kier Eagan as a religion in the same way that severed employees do. But she does all kinds of meddling that she hides from her bosses on the board, which leads to her getting fired. And right at the end, her warning to Helly indicates that she might be some kind of double agent, working to protect the severed workers, not subjugate them.
No, your friends are gonna suffer. Mark will suffer.
Mrs. Cobel, as a character, gets at a really important theme of the show. The idea that your bosses don't know what they're doing. So, the first scene of the first episode drops us into Helly's point of view as she wakes up with no idea where she is. And a voice comes on the radio, telling her that everything will be explained eventually, and asking her all kinds of weird, cryptic questions.
Great, off we go. Now to start,
Who are you?
I don't...
It's okay. If you can't answer the question, feel free to say unknown.
This first scene frames Mark as an all-knowing figure who can be a guide to Helly and to us, because he knows more than we do. But something's off, because watching it we're like, hey wait, that's Adam Scott's voice. Isn't he the main character? We can't have the main character knowing everything already. And sure enough, a little while later, we meet Mark, and we're shown that he just got promoted and has never done this before. And when we watch the scene again from his perspective, what looked like confidence before was actually him barely fumbling through.
Who are you?
Hello?
I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. Who are you?
Mark, you skipped the preamble.
Hello?
I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself.
I've talked many times about shows like this, and how so many of them have characters who know all the answers but won't reveal what information they know because of reasons. Usually that reason is that they want to keep something a secret. But in Severance, it's because they don't know either. The show consistently indicates that your boss and your boss's boss are really only slightly less clueless than you are. Mark's bosses are Mrs. Cobel and Mr. Milchick. They seem to rule the severed employees with an iron fist, but it becomes clear as the show goes on that they don't have nearly as much control over the employees as we thought. Like the code detectors. We're told that they can detect any writing in any form, but Peg got away with her notes in Puglish easily. The company operates by creating a culture where the severed employees never question their superiors, so that disobedience never occurs to them. It's a panopticon. They create an illusion of knowing everything so that the employees police themselves. Once the main characters figure this out, it's all too easy to stage an escape. At the beginning of the show, when you first find out that Mrs. Cobel and Mrs. Selving are the same person, your first thought was probably, oh, is she severed too? She's not, but she's still in a similar position to her subordinates, carrying out orders for her bosses without fully understanding why. She has frequent communications with the board through Natalie, who relays messages to her, so she never even sees or hears them. Where she seems so confident and dominant talking to Mark, her conversations with Natalie always put her on the back foot. I would not be at all surprised if this continued up the chain, with Natalie taking orders from the board taking orders from the Eagan family, and the Eagan family taking orders from their ancestor Kier, and nobody fully understands what they're doing or why. It's turtles all the way down. Or up. Mrs. Cobel might not be in full control of the situation, but still, what is her motivation here? Well, her religious beliefs suggest that she does genuinely believe in Kier Eagan and his vision, if not the modern Lumon Corporation. Or at least she did. Plus, there's a blink and you miss it moment where she's tearing down her Kier shrine, and you can see a hospital band that says Charlotte Cobel. Based on the birthday, this was probably her mother. The clear implication is that her mother's death drove her to worshipping Kier. At this point though, it's hard to speculate beyond that. But is she a secret good guy like the finale suggests? I don't think so. I've seen this trope so many times that I can recognize it on sight. It's really common in media for kids and teens, where the main characters are fighting against injustice, and some authority figure antagonist will say, "No, you have to stop. There are forces at work you don't understand." And it makes you pause as an audience to think, maybe these characters should stop. But every time, it turns out that the authority figure was only perpetuating the status quo because they were worried about the potential for something worse to happen. And it always ends up that the good guys tear down the system, and everything works out for the best. I think that Mrs. Cobel knows the severed employees will be punished for this, and she doesn't want that because she does have a heart. But she also still believes in Lumon's mission and sees it as a force for good. That whatever bad things the company does are still justified by their stated end goal, whatever that may be. But she'll be proven wrong by the end of the show. Now let's talk about Irving. There's a surprising amount of mystery subplots that revolve around him and haven't been resolved yet. Let's start at the end. In the finale, Irving wakes up in his Audi's body. We know very little about Audi Irving at this point, but from what we see here, we can figure out that he's been extensively researching Lumon and all of its employees. He also obsessively paints picture after picture of the elevator to the testing floor, which we haven't seen yet. The black paint looks a lot like the black goo Irving sees whenever he falls asleep at work. Oh, and that black goo is featured heavily in the title sequence. I'm doing a lot of guesswork here, but my best theory so far is that something's wrong with Irving's severance, so some of his memories are leaking back and forth. Audi Irving is able to remember visions of an elevator that his innie has seen. He paints pictures to figure out what it means, and then innie Irving sees the black paint in a similar way, as flashes of memory he doesn't understand. I bet that's what's prompted him to research Lumon, and he's probably either with the resistance group or on his way to joining up with them. What this shows, though, is that Severance isn't as perfect a procedure as Lumon likes to think. As for what's on the testing floor, all we know about it so far is that it's where Miss Casey was sent when she got fired. I have a feeling this has something to do with the thing Petey described, of how there are severed workers living somewhere in the building who never leave.
Look, I found a department, one they don't tell us about, one where you don't get to leave.
The main characters are probably going to get sent there next season as a punishment for their escape attempt, and we'll find out more then. Oh, and there are indicators that Irving was in the military, so it seems probable that he experienced PTSD and applied to be a severed worker to shut off part of his brain as a coping mechanism, just like Mark did with Gemma. And speaking of Gemma, and Miss Casey, what's up with Gemma and Miss Casey? How is Mark's dead wife secretly working for Lumon? I don't know. Yeah, I got nothing here. I mean, in the most general of terms, Gemma probably got involved with Lumon and found out about the shady things that they were doing, leading her to get pulled away from her friends and family into this conspiracy. Who knows if she faked her death and is here undercover, or if Lumon kidnapped her. The one thing I am confident in saying is that she is severed. Miss Casey does not have memories of outside Lumon, and she doesn't remember being married to Mark. She never gives any indication that she knows Mark. And maybe she's just a really good liar, but she's also so specific about the number of hours she's been alive that she seems sincere to me.
My life has been 107 hours long.
There is romantic tension between the two of them, so there's probably subconscious feelings in there somewhere. Alright, let's finish up by looking at the big question that drives the whole plot. What's the point of severed employees? What's Lumon doing? What data are the Macrodata refiners refining? The employees throw out a few of their own wild theories.
Populate the sea. But first, they gotta send probes down to the sea to clean up all the deadly eels and shit, because we can't cohabitate with that. We sense what's eels, and then we tell the probes what to blow up.
But we're given pretty much no clues whatsoever in the show. They go through random numbers and sort them based on their emotional reactions. And the other departments that we know about are no help either. O&D seems to just make art and decorations to use internally. And there's the one guy who raises baby goats. It all seems random. And again, why is it so important to wipe the employees' memories if even they don't understand what they're working on? Why bother with Severance at all? None of it makes any sense. Beyond any in-universe clues for solving this, it's important to note the way this question functions narratively. In a mystery box story like this, there are mysteries that the audience is meant to try and solve, with clues and hints that help give us a clearer picture of what's going on. But then there are other questions that aren't solvable because they don't give you anything to work with. They let you stew over the question across multiple seasons without so much as a hint, and it gets so built up in your mind that it feels like no answer could be satisfying. This is one of those. When asking what the numbers mean, because we have so little to go on, every theory that we could throw out there is equally plausible. So when the show does reveal it eventually, there's a high risk of it feeling underwhelming. We'll just be like, oh, that's it? Oh, okay. Case in point, the explanation given by the Lexington Letter. Yeah, I bet a lot of you have been thinking, didn't you already say what the answer was? Peg says that her innie finished her file right before a bomb blew up a Lumon competitor. So that's it. Severed Lumon employees make things blow up that Lumon wants them to. Yeah, I don't buy it. Doesn't it feel kind of lame to anyone else? It's a little too obvious. It's the first thing somebody would think of if they knew Lumon was up to something shady. And plus, there's no way the show would spoil its biggest twists in a little tie-in book that nobody knows about. This can't be the answer. Even though this book is canon, all we have is Peg's word to go on. I think it's more likely that she just misinterpreted what was going on. See, that's the issue. Every theory feels either too obvious, or like Dylan's theories, too out there, because we don't have any clues to test them against. I think this was a deliberate choice by the writers to make answering the question impossible. However, to be clear, I'm not saying that the show won't give us an answer, or that we can't guess the answer. It just means that we have to change the parameters of the question, adjust our frame of reference. Asking, what are these employees working on, or what are these numbers for, are the wrong questions. Instead, let's zoom out and ask what Lumon as a company does. Lumon is a medical and biotech company. In the Lexington Letter, Peg casually mentions that she buys Lumon brand deodorant. But in the show, nobody ever talks about what Lumon does or what the company actually sells. All they ever talk about is Severance. The tagline for the company is United in Severance, and the Eagan family is pushing to remove the legal barriers to Severance and make it more widely available to the public. It's the thing that defines Lumon's image. So here's my proposal for what I see as the only satisfying answer to the main mystery. The work that the Severed employees do seems like nonsense because it is nonsense. None of the work done on the Severed floor is useful. These employees are not here as employees really, but as test subjects, so Lumon can develop and observe the effects of severance. We've been shown that Lumon's goal is to sell severance to the public. There was Gabriella, the wife of that senator, who got early access to use severance to forget giving birth. With the legislation they're pushing through, Lumon could make bank selling severance to anybody who wants to shut out certain parts of their lives. Something as huge as this would make them the most powerful company in the world. Their Severed employees are just guinea pigs. They get the severance procedure and then run around doing various tasks, but those tasks allow the bosses to observe them and see how the severance procedure affects them, making sure it works as intended. That's why it was such a big deal that it's possible to get reintegrated. The work they're doing isn't meaningless. Its purpose is to get the employees' brains to engage with a task that activates an emotional response, so the company can monitor their reactions. I imagine it's something similar to what Wicked was doing in The Maze Runner, if you know that series. Lock a bunch of people in a compound, and make them go through a bunch of tasks to measure how their brains react. This is not the most groundbreaking theory, and I won't pretend that it is. If you look for other fan theories about this online, by far the two most common ones are that the work is all nonsense and the employees are developing severance somehow. It's, again, a little too obvious. With any mystery box show, you can generally assume that the most popular fan theory is wrong, because if the show is well written, the twist won't be so obvious. Even if it was the right answer, the showrunners would probably change their plans to make the answer something more unexpected. The whole fun of a mystery like this is to be surprised. However, I still think this theory is in the right ballpark at least, for two reasons. One, I'm specifying the significance of emotional response. I said earlier that we don't have any clues to figure out what these numbers are for, but that wasn't totally true. Everything we know about them centers around emotion. The employees sort numbers by which ones make them feel a certain way. And there are always 4 employees in MDR, corresponding to 4 different emotions, which correspond to the 4 tempers of Kier, which are basically the 4 deadly sins of this religion. Whatever the answer to this mystery is, emotions are part of it. Second, just because this is the most obvious answer doesn't mean there isn't more to it. We know so little right now. There's so much about Lumon and the higher-ups and their plans that we know nothing about. If it turned out that the most obvious theory was correct, it doesn't have to be unsatisfying. Again, we can adjust our frame of reference and zoom out. If it is true that the employees are test subjects for severance, we still don't know why severance is so important, or what Kier's supposed vision is. The answer to this mystery could be a stepping stone towards bigger and more complicated mysteries. It might seem weird that I'm so all in on this theory, when by my own admission, there's hardly any evidence to support it. But to predict where a story is headed, it's not enough to just look at the facts in the story. You also have to look at it from a meta perspective. The show is called Severance. The mysteries and major plot points of the show have to come back around to severance. Nothing else would make nearly as much narrative sense. I know this is super early, but I'm planting my flag in the sand right now. This is what the plot is building up to. Wow, I didn't expect to have this much to say about just the first season of the show. I can usually cover an entire finished show in like 25 minutes. As I make more videos though, I felt a drive to make them more and more thorough, get into as much detail as possible, so expect these kinds of videos to get longer in the future. I have to say, I'm thrilled with what I've seen from this show so far. As a first season to a mystery box story, it's textbook. I'm not going to let myself get too excited because there's always the chance that all the mysteries get resolved too fast or the show randomly gets cancelled, but this is a great start. I can't wait for season 2 to come out, so I can see if I'm right. Because I really think I might be right. Maybe.
My failure to break into the literary world in my 20s was devastating, yet it taught me a vital lesson. That it was not me who was wrong, but literature itself.